Hello, my fine friends. Welcome back to Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, joined today with Adam Stoker.
Okay.
That's
All right.
it. That's
Hey.
it, period.
Yeah. You know what? This is nice because I usually have to recover from some sort of slander or insult to start
hmm
the show, and I get to kind of start with a clean slate today. It
He really
feels
threw you
somewhat
off.
liberating. Yeah.
hmm And also joining us today is C.A. Clark. How are you, C.A. Clark?
I'm great, Stuart. Good to
This
see
is
you
your second
both.
time on the show. We're
This
glad to have you
is
back.
this is
Yeah.
I was number 7. I just looked this up earlier
Oh, wow.
today. So I was number
And do
7.
you
I don't know
remember the
what number
topic
this
now that you
is.
looked it up? I know it was AI related.
It was ethics. We talked about
Ethics of AI.
ethics.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then what happened afterwards, so just letting people peek behind the curtain a little bit, is after we stopped recording, we started having a really deep, kind of gritty conversation about the topic today. And I said, we should have recorded this. And we've been sort of back and forward for
Yeah.
a while about, is this something that we're comfortable airing? And I think ultimately we're at a point now where we are comfortable. But I'll be honest, this is a conversation I've asked a few people if they wanted to talk about, and no one wanted to touch it because it is very controversial. And so, and we'll alienate some people. So be warned. I mean, there's some folks that are not going to like what we have to say today. But you know what they are going to like, Adam Stoker?
Do I ever?
They are going to like the jingle for Stu's News.
It's
And
time. And you know what? You caught me off guard. I didn't realize you were headed there, but you know what? We're gonna do it right now.
we are being super efficient today.
It's just so good. I miss it every week.
I shouldn't have done it. All right. So,
What do you got
CA,
for us today, Stuart?
did we even have the jingle when CA was on before?
No,
I don't remember.
no, but I watched the development of it. I would just like to say I love that the side of the ship says Sue
Yeah,
news.
Sue's News.
It's so
Yeah,
perfectly AI.
yeah,
It is
it is.
perfect.
It is great. I don't know if you ever heard this. I told this story once early in the show's history. It was in one of the early episodes. But when I used AI to generate the Destination Discourse logo, and it was at the time I was using ChatGPT, and it was not rendering it right. It kept misspelling it. It wouldn't put in the one. I think the second R right in disc or no. There's only one R. It wouldn't put in the R in discourse. That's right. I can't spell. It kept missing the R. It was Destination Discourse without
AI
an
was
R.
so stupid it wouldn't put the second R in discourse.
Yeah, yeah,
We need more
yeah.
R's.
Yeah, we do. Discourse. We're like pirates. That's the pirate version of the show.
Yarr.
Discourse. But finally, what I did is I said I reprompted it and I just spelled discourse with two R's when I spelled it, and then an R popped in. So it just decided to ignore the first one, but not the second one. It was wild. So I outsmarted AI that time. You guys outsmarted me with spelling this time. But today's Stu's News is our good friends Brand USA launched a new website a couple months ago called America the Beautiful, which I love the campaign in general. I think that's cool. That's something that, resonates with people both domestically and internationally, that they've heard the song, they know, that means something, and it connotes something too, right? I think you can hear that and really feel something. But the website, they launched a landing page with this, which was primarily powered by Mindtrip, which, if you're not familiar, is an AI conversational tool, but they're doing things a little different. Full disclosure, this is not a plug for Mindtrip, but we at Visit Model Beach recently launched a version of Mindtrip on our site, and we're beginning to do some things similar to America the Beautiful. But what I think I wanted to talk about this about, why I wanted to talk about this, is because I think it's a nudge towards the direction we've talked about on the show before about where websites are going. I believe websites are going to sort of be a combination of search, social, and conversation. And this is a nod to that, because when you go to americathebeautiful.com, what you'll see is there's a lot of prompts. There's a lot of these little lozenges that have questions or statements in that you can click and jump straight into a conversation with the chat. And so I love this. I think it's a great first step in a direction that I've wanted to see DMOs go for a while. We're certainly going to be emulating and testing this. I have no data to say whether this is working or not. So if Jeanette's listening, would love to have you or someone from your team come on and talk about it. But
Stuart,
I like this a lot.
Dan Rosenbaum, who
Yeah.
came on the show previously, actually
Mhm.
went to Brand USA and played a major part in this project as well. So Dan might be somebody that we could have come
Oh,
talk
I
about.
didn't even know that. They're
Yeah.
picking up all the good
And
ones.
and just
That's great.
and just since we're doing disclosures, we built that website for
Oh
Brandis
yeah.
and Miles
So
too,
Miles, this is just a shameless plug for Miles today, and
so
that's fine.
but
It's that kind of
you're
show.
raising a really important point, and there's different things that are, you have a bunch of different players in the space doing that sort of conversational chat for the website, and also not a plug for Mind Trip necessarily, but they do have a very different approach than a lot of the other players, right? There are other
Mhm.
players that are more focused on kind of the social aspect of it, or getting that conversation pulled out into other places. They're a lot more focused on kind of the traveler life cycle,
Yeah.
which is one of the things that's interesting about it, and that the integration into the website is very much in line with like the way that I and that we had talked about the websites evolving over time, where we're trying to pull what the user actually needs out,
Hmm.
right? And one way that
Yep.
we can talk about doing that is personalization, but it's difficult to do personalization on a destination website because you don't have the repeat visitation. And so this is sort of another expression of that, of trying to say, like, where are you in your decision making process, and how do we shortcut that into giving you what you need? And so you have those little plugs, whatever they are, in the content of the website, that is trying to help provide that context, right?
Yeah.
Like, if this is a
Well, it's
thing that you
great.
want to do, start here, and then we can launch off of that.
Yeah, and putting it front and center also helps you with just into gathering intelligence, because over time you can start to recognize patterns, or which of these choices,
Yeah.
choose your own adventure, are people actually selecting, and now I need to create more content around that. And one of the things I like about this tool and others that are in the space is I can sort of start to see the conversations evolve over time, and I can see how that journey evolves and what stimulus I need to provide more of in order to get the outcomes that I want. But I like this. I think it's we've dabbled with AI chat. We've sort of kept it, like you said, it's sort of more of a separation from the website, although it referred to the website. It wasn't really as integrated. And I think this is a step in the right direction for them, and hopefully for us too. We just launched like a week ago, so we'll see. Adam, do you like this? Have you played around with this website?
Yeah, I love it. I think, we obviously toyed around a little bit with trying to build some AI tools, but one of the challenges we had was integrating the environments and figuring out how to do that. That's one of the things that with Mindtrip I've been really, really impressed with when I've seen their demos and seen some of the sites that they've launched on. And obviously this site is a major example of that. And CA, your team clearly did an incredible job in integrating the environments as well and making sure that AI plays the correct role. I was just looking at this and hitting a couple of the prompts as well, and the reaction to the prompt is still it feels like you're in the LLM platform. And I
Hmm.
think we're at the point in the consumer experience where that has a lot of value, that you don't
Yeah.
have to toggle back and forth between the website experience and the LLM experience. So really impressed with the integration here. I don't want to just yell a victory lap just yet, because I want to see what the data says at the end of
Hmm.
this, right? And how did it perform? Because that's ultimately what decides whether this is good or bad. But from every indicator I can see, it looks like the best integration that I've seen between an LLM and a website. And I think this is a really good example of where websites need to go across the board.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we put a lot of effort into our first generation LLM chat, and it was really disappointing because fewer than 1% of the folks that were coming to our website were going to that experience, right? And so it's like you put a lot of effort in where we failed, I think, was integrating it, and the ability to sort of put someone into the conversation and make it feel organic and natural and personal, individualized, I think is really smart. So I hope to see more of this kind of experiment. But you're right, the proof is in the pudding. let's see the data. If they come back a year from now and say, well, only 1% of people are actually staying engaged in this thing, we've got more people clicking into it, but then they're leaving it or bouncing off the site, then we're probably doing something wrong. But to me, it feels good. It feels valuable. It feels like it's helpful. It's not, good technology should always feel invisible. Like it should feel natural and organic. It shouldn't feel like I'm having to work to get something to happen. And I feel like they do a good job with this on this website. So americathebeautiful.com.
Can I ask both of you a question real quick on the
Sure.
same topic? Have either of you interacted with a site that's using a technology called Algolia? I would imagine CA has probably
Yeah.
gotten involved in it. How do you feel about that compared to the Mind Trip experience?
I think the challenge that these are actually really similar threads. So I think the challenge that I have with the way that Algolia has been implemented, and that's even stuff that we have done with Algolia, is it's still isolated. And what is happening, what we're observing happening here with Mind Trip and America the Beautiful is this sort of tighter connection between what you're looking at on the page and what you are engaged in, and then how the AI can react to that. And Algolia has there are opportunities for that, but it tends to be siloed. Like the way that it's being used tends to be this sort of silo. Like you go to search, you do this, right? You do this activity, and then you get these results. Where I think the interesting opportunity is, how does that mix in with the content of the website, right? Like I'm a lot more interested in the idea that a website can remix its content to meet what you need way more than I am having a conversation with an LLM about lasagna, right? Like I just don't, those two things are different. And I would much rather have a website and look at ways for the website to integrate this content and adjust what it's doing, which there are some pieces of that with Algolia, but my observation is most of the implementations tend to be siloed, right? And are sort of missing what I think the opportunity is. Just as one aside, so one of our other AI opener participants, Destination Vancouver, I think has a really good kind of different approach to how the chat is integrated into the website. And so I might suggest that they would be a great participant in your in a future podcast to talk about that kind of approach, because it is a very different way that they went about doing it. But is still focused on that kind of like, how do we make it?
Let's visit Vancouver. So we said, yeah, we'd love an intro.
Destination Vancouver.
Yeah. Destination Vancouver. I don't think we've had any Canadians on the show yet, have we?
Not yet.
Maybe. Yeah, so maybe we got someone from New Zealand, so we got that one checked. But yeah, that's great. All right, let's shift into the topic. So this is something I've wanted someone to talk about ever since we had our first sort of shadow conversation after hours conversation, and that is the environmental impact of AI. Right, it's a conversation a lot of people have sort of talked about. There's a lot of rhetoric around it, on both sides. There's a lot of folks that are very cavalier about AI and sort of dismissing the environmental. There's folks that I think are probably leaning heavily on it as an excuse to not jump into AI, or at least as a cautionary way to slow people down. And I think a lot of those are doing it for the right reasons, but it's a lot of conjecture at this point, right? It's a lot of opinion. It's a lot of subjectivity. So I do want to start by saying a couple of things, and I'm going to hand it over to UCA to sort of make the thesis and talk about what we've learned. But I think we all genuinely want everyone to listen to this conversation with an open mind. There's going to be people that are going to wince at some of the things we say. I ask you to give us the benefit of the doubt, and I will say things that I believe to be true of everyone on this. Like, I think we genuinely care about the environment. Everyone on this, we want to be good stewards of the environment, right? There's no one on this that doesn't. We're not going to get into climate change, things like that in this conversation. I don't think that's the conversation we're here to have today necessarily. We might, Adam might go rogue, who knows? So regardless of what your personal opinions are as an individual on, because there are people I fully acknowledge that are on different sides of the equation when it comes to things like climate change.
Well, but we all have interest in leaving a better world for the people that come after us, one
for
way or
sure,
another.
we all have an interest in the human race surviving and the planet Earth
And
continuing to thrive, right? I think that's
Sure.
fair, right? And whether
and we do all live in the environment, so that
right,
part is
right, for
it's
sure,
important to
and,
remember.
and hopefully generations after us will continue to live, right?
Yeah.
So
Until
regardless
Mars.
regardless of you brought Elon into it. Now we're down into a political
I couldn't
debate.
help it. I couldn't help. Too much
So
fun.
let's put all our weapons down. Like everyone that's listening that feels strongly, right now we're a very divided world, and we all live in our own subjective truths to a degree, and we're all victims of our own echo chambers. Let's put all that aside for this conversation. Let's be intellectually honest. Let's give us, the people talking, the benefit of the doubt that there's no malice in here. There's no jabs at any individual groups, right? Let's just have a objective, science-based conversation about what we see, right? And if you have problems with anything we say, let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about it. Let's not like vilify or throw stones, because I don't think that's helpful, especially right now. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to you, CA. Where do you want to start with
Okay.
this thing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. This is the last time I did this show, I did not prepare to this level, partially because of this issue. So I have lots of documentation that I put together to just sort of make sure that I could organize my thoughts. So I'll kind of go through those. I mean, first of all, I just will acknowledge that I am not an environmental scientist. This is stuff that I get asked all the time, and that then I am sort of curious about, and so I go try to unravel the answers to try to answer the questions that people ask me. I mean, I've been talking to people about AI since ChatGPT from November of 2022, and this is one of the most common questions I get. Right? Is like, okay, but what about the environmental concern? And it just was always such a complex issue that didn't seem as nearly as clear cut as people wanted it to be. And so I have been collecting this information and tried to put together like, what is going on? What kinds of questions do you need to ask? The statement that I will make, sort of the disclaimer statement I will make, is that quantifying emissions for any activity, whether we are talking about eating a hamburger or using ChatGPT, is really profoundly influenced by where that activity is happening, when you measure it, and how you draw the lines about what is being measured. And those are the really core questions that you have to ask anytime we talk about any of these. So I'll start with that kind of a disclosure statement, and then we can talk about the things that I really think we're missing from the conversation about AI and environmental impact. Because again, this comes up all the time, right? This is like the number one, and I've talked to Jeanette about this. I've talked to lots of other people who are out talking in the industry about AI, and this is one of the number one questions people ask: what about the environmental impact? There's kind of two things that are missing from that conversation in my view. The first one is comparison, because, and this is no offense to anyone who is Amish, okay, but like the people who ask me these questions are not Amish people, right? They're not people that we're not talking about a black or white situation, okay? We're on Zoom right now, okay? Like usually these are conversations that are happening on Zoom, which is eating up a whole bunch of emissions right now. And those estimates are anywhere from like 50 to 150 grams of CO2e per hour per person for Zoom. And so, and on top of that, we're in the travel industry. So I also feel like if you're in the travel industry and you haven't reconciled the kind of cost benefit of environmental impact versus societal value, you probably should take a minute to think about that for yourself. But there's very little comparison. Okay, we say like this uses, we estimate that that ChatGPT needs this much power, or it's going to change this, or it's going to change that, or it needs this amount of thing. But we don't put that in the context of anything else that we're doing, right? Netflix, Zoom, TikTok, eating a hamburger. These are all things that we do all the time. And we don't have that same level of scrutiny that goes into that. So part of this is just being able to say, yep, no, I'm not at all saying that we shouldn't worry about the environmental impact of AI. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ask questions about it. We absolutely should. I'm just saying, if you're going to care about the one thing, you should probably care about the other things. Otherwise, you're just sort of cherry picking. Otherwise, you have to question why you are asking that question or why you're focusing on that, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the thing you want to focus on, then you have to back up and go, wait a minute, am I doing this because I'm resistant to this idea? Or am I doing this because I'm actually concerned about the environmental impact of this? In which case, I should then you gotta look at all the rest of this, right? You gotta look at the how much you watch Netflix. Have you ever had someone say to you, and you said, oh man, did you see, K-pop Demon Hunters on Netflix, right? And then have you ever had someone say to you, oh, I would never watch that. Do you have any idea how much emissions there are from watching Netflix? I've never had that. You?
No.
No, and I think what makes it additionally interesting is, and I want to make sure we're not like being critical of folks who have,
Or dismissive.
or dismissive, right? Because I think there's some valid concerns, and I think that we are asking questions with intellectual honesty, right? I don't know that everyone is, but I think we're trying to be intellectually honest. But I think you brought up the travel industry, right? I think you had the percentage of the carbon emissions from travel are something like 20% of all emissions, right? It's a substantial, travel is a major driver, right? So the fact that we're
Way lower.
promoting that.
Well, again, depends on how you count it. So I'm trying to remember my numbers. Meat and dairy for consumption is like 15% or
Okay.
16% of global emissions. Travel
Yeah.
is 2 or 3%, but it is important to note that WTTC themselves estimates that number at more like 7 or 8% when
Yeah.
you include driving and water usage and heating and like all of these
Yeah.
other things that have to happen
Right.
when you
All of the
travel.
nuance and complexity that a lot of people sort of
So,
smooth over when they're not
you know,
really being honest. Yeah.
all of travel is somewhere between 2 and 8% of total
Yeah.
global emissions,
Yeah.
in a given year.
Yeah,
And then digital and IT stuff, like all the things we're doing is like 2% or something like
Yeah.
that, right? So I think that's one. Sorry, Adam, to cut you off, but I want to make one other point.
yeah.
The other side is like, with ChatGPT or any AI, like we're like the user, we're the one that's typing, we're the direct impact, right? But a lot of what we do also has indirect impact, right? So not when I create a social post, right? Say I create a TikTok video, right? There's the environmental impact of what went into creating that. Like I might have traveled to a location, I might have used a camera that was manufactured and all of the input that went into that. I'm using electricity. I'm using my own energy, which I consume food, right? You could go infinitely deep into this, right? And so that's my input of it. But then we're not even thinking about the fact that once I post that, what is the carbon emission of the people consuming it, right? The other people, not me, not my impact, but I'm creating that impact because now I've produced something that other people are consuming. And say two people watch that video, right? But then what if 100 million people watch it? Right now, I would celebrate 100 million people watching my video as a success, but I wouldn't challenge that with, oh, but there was an environmental cost in the fact that more people watched that thing. So I think that's where I have some challenges with some of the critics of AI because there is an intellectual consistency across everything, which I think is the point you were trying to make, CA.
Yeah, I think I want to it's funny. I didn't see a world where I would take this side of the argument, so I'm going to say that leading into this. But the part that we may be skipping over here is just AI in general. We don't have enough energy right now to support the demand that's coming, right? So we're talking the construction of thousands of data centers. We're talking about the displacement environmentally of a lot of real estate in order to be able to create those data centers. We're talking about the emissions of all the construction and everything that goes into that. So when
The
people are
water
concerned,
usage, there's other
the
stuff
water
too.
usage, yeah, there's so much that's going to happen. I mean, right now there's a lot of conversation too about needing to leverage nuclear power because we're not going to have enough solar power or some of the other power sources that are coming. And all of that to say, I recognize that and I see that as an issue. I understand that it's an issue. But one of the things that I think when we're having this conversation about environmental impact of AI, one of the things that we're missing is we have invested hundreds of billions of dollars to this point in trying to stop damaging the environment with human consumption. And so far, it's been really challenging to make the desired impact. And I actually have a lot of faith in AI's ability through the leveling up of intelligence to help us understand how to solve that problem and help, even if there's going to be the data centers and energy on the other side of that. I think AI is going to be able to have the ability to level us up to the point where we can optimize other points of emission that can help create a better future for our kids and other generations. And I think that's the part that a lot of people are overlooking, is I think the long-term impact, if AI can truly do what we think it can do, to be able to optimize and protect the earth in a way that we haven't been able to so far.
But the argument
I mean,
against that is it's sort of a hopeful strategy, right? It's like we just assume that some of this magical thing. Now there is evidence that it is.
I think we've
right?
done that up to this point with
Yeah, yeah.
environmental impact.
But
and
it's like we hope that it's gonna magically fix our CO2 problems, right? Whatever. There's evidence that it already is, right? There's already AI that's helping us with like mitigation of wildfires and other stuff that has massive environmental impact. So I can see both sides of that. It's like
Yeah.
we're sort of building this super intelligence that's going to help us solve the problems that we're sort of exacerbating and creating right now. So
Well,
I think it's
so
a valid part of the conversation.
so let me address a couple, because this is a thing that comes up a lot, right? And there is a there is an aggregate. I mean, if I just shortcut this conversation, okay, individual usage is um is tiny and falling. Okay, like that. I mean, we can talk about the specifics of that. Your individual usage of whatever it is, ChatGPT or Nano Banana, or it doesn't matter, is microscopic, and that impact is falling. The aggregate, right, of everyone using that technology is huge, and that's been true of any technology, and especially a technology that's ramped up as fast as this. So that the point about not having enough energy in the United States is partly about a prediction about the kind of power that we need to do this, which I think is a flawed. I think there's a little bit of an argument there that goes, at this rate, my baby is on track to be 800 pounds and 17 feet tall, right?
Right.
At this rate of growth, right? So I think there's a little bit of that sort of like missing the point about that prediction. But there's also another really important issue here to keep in mind, is that the United States as a country has made almost zero progress growing our energy grid in the last 20 or 30 years. We've done nothing. And meanwhile, China has increased their energy grid by
Yep.
like 50% over the last 30 years. So part of this isn't necessarily about AI being the thing that pushes that pushes us over the edge. Part of this is about, we haven't invested
We need
in
capacity
the
regardless of
infrastructure
AI.
for 30 years that now we're paying the price for.
Yeah.
Like there was a period of time during the United States development where we were really focused on creating energy, and that just hasn't been the case for 30 years. So more really, I mean, we've increased our energy grid by like 5% in that amount of time. And that's exacerbating a problem that was going to happen no matter what. It's just being significantly accelerated by AI.
Yeah.
And so this brings me to the second part that I think is generally missing, has been generally missing. And part of the reason that we're having this conversation now is I think we have reached the point where we have some data that is real. So the thing that was largely missing, there was comparison, where we just didn't have, we weren't being given in any of those individual conversations any kind of context for what we were talking about, right? ChatGPT uses 5 grams of CO2e. It doesn't, by the way. But even if we say that it does, what else uses 5 grams, right? And are you applying that same sort of like rigor to using the microwave as you are to using ChatGPT? And the answer is no, most of the time, because you're cherry picking that answer. So comparison is one thing, and then specifics is really the other. And this has been the biggest issue, if you ask me, is that we just don't have real numbers. These are all privately held companies. They are all closed systems, and there has been very little disclosure of any real number on what is actually happening. And so that led to a bunch of guesswork, and that led to people using global averages in place of specific numbers, because you couldn't get because I can cite a global average and I can point to it and I can say this is a real number, but I can't get a real number for what it actually cost OpenAI, and you still can't, right? Like there's been some discussion of it, but it's not like they've really formally published a lot of that stuff. Other people have, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the reason that global averages don't work, a number of different reasons, but one of the core ones is that there are over 5,000 data centers in the United States. And those data centers are in a bunch of different jurisdictions. Some of them are in jurisdictions where the power comes from coal. Some of them are in jurisdictions where the power comes from hydroelectric dams, right? They're all over the place. And if you take the global, and some of them are old, some of them are decades old, some of them are brand new. And if you take the average of the United States, of all 5,400, whatever there are, data centers, and you say, this is what it costs to generate this, watt, right? 1 watt hour costs this much emissions. You're doing that across all of those data centers. And then you take that and you apply that to AI, and you go, if you're using AI, then the total average means that it's this amount. And that part is totally wrong, because it's not in 5,000 data centers. There's less than 1% of those data centers where you could actually train or deliver AI. And those tend to be the ones that are newer, right? And so those are the ones where we need the data for. We don't need a global average. We need an actual specific average of where was this trained? How long did it take? Where did that power come from? What was the environmental impact of what that is? Again, if you're going to talk about the environmental impact or training debt, right, of ChatGPT 5, then you need to know how long it took, how much energy it was, and where that energy was created. Because if that was done in, and we don't know, just to be clear, if that was done in one of Azure's data centers, that many of those data centers in Washington and in Oregon and in the Pacific Northwest are largely renewable energy, right? They're located next to hydroelectric dams. Like there's a difference between the amount of power that they use and then how they got that power. And again, I'm not trying to excuse the well, we just shouldn't worry about this. It's great to ask questions about it, but you have to go the further step and say, okay, where was that happening, right? And if it was happening in a coal-fired plant, then yeah, okay, then that is a concern. But I don't think that's the case. I think if we try to look at this, objectively and try to ask these questions, we're going to find that in most of the cases, these data centers are the more modern of them. Which brings me to the reason that really one of the core reasons why this conversation is viable right now is that Google released a paper that did, I think, a really comprehensive job of trying to spell out what it costs them and how much power was required to do. And granted, this is inference only, not training, but what it costs to use Gemini. And they answered a lot of the questions that we have had concerns about. They did a good job of providing comparison, and they did a good job of providing specifics about what was actually happening in their data center. Most of that is in Council Bluffs. I'm from Iowa. Go Iowa. Most of that was in their Council Bluffs facility in Iowa. And so there's a lot of really good data that is part of that report, which I think leads us to be able to have a conversation. Two really important things, and then I swear to God, I'll shut up. Two important things about that data. One is that they came up with a number that was about 0.03 grams of CO2e, or about 9 seconds of watching television per average interaction with Gemini. Okay, that appears to be a pretty defensible number for inference. That number carries through. There's questions about water, and we can get into a bunch of those other ones. That's a really important thing is we're coalescing around this idea that we're pretty much talking about 0.03 grams of CO2e, right? That's one of those core numbers. The other really important thing that is in that report from Google is that the median energy consumption decreased 33 times, and the carbon footprint per prompt dropped 44 times over the 12-month period that preceded that report. Stop and think about that for a second. This is a decrease of 33 times, not 33%, 33 times less and 44 times less in carbon footprint, while simultaneously the models got smarter and better and faster. Okay. And this is one of the really core issues that is here, is that there is so much room to improve the efficiency of these that I don't think that prediction that says we're going to need 25% more power in the United States to run this, I think is not the right number, because we're not taking into account how quickly this stuff can fall. And this is also where, like, you talk about airline fuel. Is there any scenario where airline fuel is going to be 33 times more efficient in a 12-month period? No. But we can with compute, and compute has a really solid history of dropping the cost and the power consumption over time, even as it gets faster and better.
So AI may be the worst today that it's ever going to be.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. Even if you think about even if it accelerates in capability and usage, you still have this pressure pushing that down of how much more efficient it gets.
Stuart, do you have a response? Because I have another comment here, but I don't want to dominate the conversation.
No, I mean, I think CA did an amazing job summarizing it. I mean, I think it's mind blowing to me, like that 33 time decrease. Like we haven't seen we're not going to ever see a 33 time increase in the amount of usage, right? It's in that analogy of 9 seconds of TV. You're not probably not doing a prompt every 9 seconds, right? That's not realistic. By the time you've typed it, by the time you've read it, whatever, you're processing it. So, I mean, I think it's even if you were constantly on an LLM having a conversation, you're literally having less of an impact than watching TV, you know? And that's just standard TV, I'm assuming. That's not even like a streaming service when you're using your internet and stuff like that. So I don't know. I feel like I don't think it's going to stop some of the concerns, nor should it, right? Because I think we always need to be asking questions about the environment. I think that's in everyone's best long-term interest. I think where I hope this conversation we're having and these reports that Google have put out, I think where I hope it has an impact is on what we prioritize moving forward and where our efforts go, right? I think we've been critical of the destination marketing industry on this show before. You know, we love it. We see the show as a love letter. And I think some of my favorite things about the industry is how we come together, right? How we have these big institutions that we can serve on boards for, and we can talk collaboratively about the future of DMOs and what we should be doing and how we should navigate an ever-changing landscape. I will say, and this is going to sound a little harsh, and I'm going to try to be as nice as I can. Please forgive me for it. But
wow.
I've sat on more than one board in the last 12 months where we're talking about the opportunities around AI when one very loud voice in that group has raised their hand and raised the concern of environmental impact to the point that it becomes a major focal point of the conversation and the direction. And I think that to me is not where industry should be focused right now. Like I think it's something we should all be individually concerned about, and we should all, you know, be mindful of. But for a major institution to say one of the pillars of AI is to focus on this at the expense of figuring out how can AI make us more effective? Because we haven't even talked about the opportunity cost of it, right? So if I'm faster at doing things and I can do things more effectively because of AI, what is that saving me? You know, in terms of other things I would be doing with my computer. If this distracts us as an industry from focusing on how our consumers' behavior is going to shift as a result of AI and what do we need to be doing about it now to stay relevant in the future, those are where we need to be focused and where our big institutional organizations need to be focused. And we get too distracted as an industry at whatever the latest thing is about doing the right thing. And I hope that we don't get too distracted. I've seen it trying to happen, trying to manifest. When I've seen it, I've tried to curtail it. But this should not be a primary focus of our industry, in my opinion, at this point.
Well, sorry, you go ahead, Adam.
Oh, just knowing what you're capable of, Stuart. When you said you were going to be mean, I expected a lot worse, and so that was honestly a little disappointing. I I'm a big believer that you need to live in the world that you're in. And I think this is one of those situations where you cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an analogy here that we use in the tourism space a lot. And that's the fact that when tourism destinations, like let's say a rural destination, suddenly gets inundated with a lot of tourism, what everyone runs around saying is, well, we don't have the bathrooms or facilities to support this new visitation. And that's where most of the conversation goes. However, the way to solve that is by leveraging the new revenue from the new travelers and tourism that comes to town, and to use that to build the new facilities, to use that to build the restrooms, and to use that to accommodate, because you're not like awareness happened. People know about the destination today, and you're not going to be able to. And trust me, Moab, Utah has tried, right? Like they have tried everything they can, the residents, to get visitors to stop coming, and they're not stopping. They're still going. And so from just a practical perspective, AI is here. AI is going to continue whether we as an industry get on board or not. And so instead, we need to make sure, of course, we need to be aware of the impact that we're making. But just like CA said, in a couple of years, we're already down 33x and 44x on the impact that it's having. And we also, with the opportunity cost that you're talking about, Stuart, the opportunity we would step over by avoiding it far exceeds the negative impact we could have. And so I just think we have to live in the world that we're in and leverage AI to the best of our ability. And then, of course, through the breakthroughs that come from AI, we use that to minimize the negative environmental impact that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does come up a lot. Okay, I mean, I said this at the beginning. It comes up a lot. It's a question people ask me all the time. Somebody always asks this question. And to your point, Stuart, there are, you know, circumstances where it sidetracks a conversation that really shouldn't be about that. And it's not that we should dismiss the you know, the choices that we make and the impact that it has on the environment. That is not at all the point that I'm trying to make. But the point I am trying to make, I think, is that if that's what you're really concerned about, there's way easier ways to make an impact than not using
Watch
AI.
less Netflix.
Regardless of whether you are regardless of the, you know, whether or not you think there's opportunity in AI, and right, like and what it means in the long run. Like, let's just say it doesn't mean anything at all. Okay, let's say it's just a wash for everything else that we do. You're still better off trying to mitigate a different activity than this one, right? Like, don't eat a hamburger. A hamburger is anywhere between 15, that's on the low end, and in some reckonings, like 2,500 grams of CO2e to produce and then consume a hamburger. That's way more than what we're talking about, than you would use probably in a week or a month, depending on what that number is, even if you used AI really heavily. So if that's what you're concerned about, then focus on the places where you can make an impact. And yeah, one of the core problems here is that facility in Council Bluffs that Google has was on track to be carbon zero in 2030 and now is not, right? And that is definitely a thing that we go, okay, we were on track to do this and now we're not because of the demand of AI. Yep, that is absolutely true, and we do need to be concerned about that. But the context of that is, it is a tiny fraction of what the overall emissions are in the world. You want to focus on something, focus on concrete, focus on the steel industry, focus on meat and dairy for consumption. Like, those are all places where you could make a much bigger impact than by worrying about whether you're using AI or not, right? I'm not going to use AI because I'm worried about the carbon footprint, but instead of using AI, I'm going to go watch TikTok. Well, TikTok servers are largely in jurisdictions that don't have the kind of regulations, environmental regulations. And consequently, an hour of TikTok is like 140 grams of CO2e. Wow. Okay, like that's dramatically higher than what we're talking about with an AI interaction.
So there's probably some folks listening that feel like we're attacking them now, and I definitely don't want that to be the case, right? Because I think I don't want to tell anyone how to think or what to prioritize, right? We're trying to lay out the facts. We're trying to be trying to be objective. Like, I think honestly, the three of us are politically are at different places. I don't think any two of us are at the same place on a political spectrum. So I think we're trying to be intellectually honest and objective about this. But so let's sort of turn a little bit, because I think we've beaten a dead horse to a large degree. I think we all agree that the impact of AI seems to be, from all the data, all the evidence, seems to be less than, as an individual, less than folks thought, and decreasing, dramatically decreasing, right? And I think we all agree that on a mass scale, there's probably a pretty large impact, but relative to other things, it's still not, right? And so again, when none of us are saying we shouldn't care about the environment, none of us are saying that, giving us an opinion on global warming or humans' relation to that. That's not what this conversation is. It's about, this is a tool, AI is a tool that is, in my opinion, and I think the two of you, is a net positive to the destination marketing world. And this is a conversation that has been distracting some folks, especially some of the bigger institutions, in my view, to the detriment of the industry. And I also think this is a conversation that has been a shield for some people to not embrace it, some organizations to not embrace AI. And I want to get away from that, because I think to me, it's borderline unethical to not be all in on AI at this point, in at least understanding how can it make you a more effective DMO, how can it make you a more effective human, because the tools are there, they're available, the tools to learn how to use the tools are there and they're available. So to stick your head in the ground and pretend it's not a benefit would be akin to not embracing the internet, not embracing mobile, not embracing social at some point in the past, which folks, and DMOs have been guilty of that, right? So I would like to sort of spend the last few minutes of the conversation shifting to, okay, we sort of set our opinion. Certainly welcome a differing opinions. Some will have it, but if you're someone that's been sitting there concerned about the environmental impact, but now you've heard some of this, and maybe we've diminished some of that concern. Hopefully we have. Like, what next? Like, to those folks that maybe have been sitting on the sidelines or using this as their primary sort of reason that they're not all in on AI, like, what advice would you give those people, CA, in terms of what's the next step? They're beginning to take a new journey perhaps in AI. What's their next step? To put you on the spot without preparing at all for that.
So I'm gonna respond. I don't need you to be all in on AI, right? I don't need people to be in a position where they are unquestionably, just like this is the thing
blindly
that's gonna solve
following,
all the problems.
for sure.
But I do think I do think that there aren't a lot of really compelling reasons to not be experimenting with this right now. And in fact, the reasons why you really should be, the benefit, the opportunities that you have, the sort of, pressures and issues that are coming, that you owe it to yourself and to your organization to make sure that you know what is going on in this space. You can it's just as valuable to conclude, to end up at a place where you know what it can and can't do and what you can expect to get out of it and what you can't, and to decide that there are certain activities that you do that are not enhanced by that. That's fine. But I don't think there's a scenario where you can. I think if you were sitting on the sidelines going, I'm not going to get involved in that because it's too complicated and I don't think it's going to work, I think you're missing the point. I would much rather talk to someone who has done that, like who has gone through this process, who is on this journey, has tried the tools, has genuinely and authentically engaged in those tools, and then come to a conclusion that said, these are the things that I don't think it's good for. That's a really great conversation, right? I don't need you to follow it blindly, but if you are going to have a conversation about it, you need to be part of it, right? You can't be sitting outside going, that sucks, when you're not involved in, because you don't know, you don't have the context to be able to be part of that conversation. So be part of that conversation, I guess, is my message. You don't have to agree that it's the best thing. You don't have to agree that it's going to solve all your problems, and I don't think it will. but I do think you have to. I think you have to engage it. I don't think there's this
Yeah.
scenario where you can just be like, I'm not going to engage in these things, right? I'm not going to be a part of this. I don't think
But
that's a realistic.
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't want to get political, but I may be here a little bit, but we, a lot of folks today are formulating opinions on things without doing the deep research, right? And so, or at least experiencing it first. They're relying on third parties to tell them how to think. And I
Agreed.
think we've got to get to a point where, whether that be our universities or our media, it's there was a phrase I heard the other day. I think it was on the All In podcast actually, but it was about universities need to teach us how to think, not what to think, And so I think, a lot of people listening to this show, and it might sound preachy and it might sound at times like we have strong opinions that we expect everyone to share, which I could completely understand why someone would have that. But really, the point is we're trying to stimulate conversation. We're trying to get you to think about this stuff so you can formulate your own opinions. I'm not going to name the organization. I was at a board meeting recently for a large organization in our industry, and there's some folks on there that I'd say have been in the industry for a while, and there was some folks on there when we're talking about an upcoming event that AI was mentioned, and there were audible groans from the board about AI in this like sense of fatigue for all the
Really get that.
conversations about AI. And these are people that are not AI users. They are not embracing AI, but they've sort of become disenfranchised because it's almost become a meme in our industry, right? And so that is really, really dangerous. And I actually called it out in the board meeting. I sort of pointed out how concerning that was. Won some friends, won some not friends after that people came up to me
Well,
afterwards.
win some, lose some.
Yeah. But that's the challenge we're trying to fight with this show, right? Is our industry's apathy towards embracing new things that potentially could be game changers for us. I'm not saying AI is a game changer for everyone. It certainly has been for us at Visit Mona Beach. I think it has the potential to be a game changer for everyone, but you at least have to have the commitment to try it honestly and with the appropriate amount of rigor to determine that for yourself. To rely on other people's arguments, weak or strong arguments of their prefabricated opinion of why you should or shouldn't do it. Don't listen to us. Go do it for yourself. That's what I'm trying to say.
Or just to be, I mean, or just to be sort of fed up with it because it's the topic that everybody wants to hear about.
Yeah.
This is a huge struggle. Okay, like a
Yeah.
lot of what I do is try to educate my my own people and our clients and our industry about what the opportunities are, and that is about AI. That's the title that I have. It's the job I'm supposed to be doing. And there's this struggle of like nobody wants to have intro to AI anymore, right? Like nobody wants to go to that. You go to the conference and everybody's like, I've heard it, right? I've heard the thing about the intro to AI, but yet we still have most of the people in the industry are using it like it's Google, right? Like most of the people still need that intro to AI, but they're tired of hearing about it. And so how do we juggle? Because if I jump to the 202 class, right, and I go like, here's, let's talk about like how these things work, then most of the people are like lost, right? They're like, I don't know what's going on here.
Well, and this is where I kind of feel like, you've both been very diplomatic in this. Maybe I'll take the not be so diplomatic and just say, like, there's a reason there's a word in the English language called homeostasis. And that's that our like inner, everything within us wants to stay the same. And I think a lot of the people who are using this argument or other arguments to not use AI, when you really dig into it, when you really get down to it, it's much less concern about that than it is a desire to justify not evolving or changing. And I think the lack of willingness to evolve or change will be the decider whether or not someone's successful in the next 5 years in their role. And the reason we're doing this is because everyone's body has a desire for homeostasis, and we want to help you get out of that because we want you to be successful over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And the rate of change is not going to decrease. the rate of change is going to increase, and the gap between those willing to change and those unwilling to change may become insurmountable if you don't make that decision to move forward today. So if you have this argument or another argument as to why you're not going to jump in on AI, please do some introspection and ask yourself, is this homeostasis or a deeply held belief? Or am I comfortable scrolling scrolling Instagram, but I'm not comfortable using AI? That probably means that I'm less willing to change than it is that I'm truly negatively impacting the environment.
Yeah.
For
Well,
sure.
I mean, anyone that studied any kind of neuroscience understands how we rationalize the decisions we've made subconsciously, right? Sort of part of our brain is going to make the decision, the yes, no, the ones or zeros. A lot of that is driven by chemicals, things like dopamine, right? In Then we rationalize it with logical thought after the fact. And I think that's some of what's happening here. Like change is painful. Like literally it's painful for humans. So I get it. But I think this is something we got to commit to, because I think I'd go even further. I don't even think it's just that individuals will be irrelevant. I think large swaths of the industry could become irrelevant, and DMOs could literally disappear. And if a few of those go, then it's like dominoes, man. We've seen what happens with taxes and funding in the past. When a handful of DMOs start to struggle, then it emboldens elected officials to do the same. And we're always in a pendulum swing. I just want to make sure that pendulum's swinging in the right direction, not in a direction that's going to demolish DMOs. So
Yep.
this is great. I think we could talk for another hour, CA. I'd love to talk
sure.
about like the whole concept about the 101. Like how do we educate the industry? Because I feel like there's a fundamental flaw right now with a lot of our the shows that we go to, the conferences, because it's hard to select what to go to. Like I'd say, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to say that Adam is an above average thinker in terms of marketing in the destination marketing space, right?
The
Is that
nicest thing
fair?
you've ever said to
I
me.
know.
You wanted
Um,
him to be mean. He's just
I
trying
know.
to
I'm trying to be
fulfill what
nice
you were
today.
looking for.
So what he wants to get from a session is different than someone that's just entered the industry, right? And so, but there's no way to really delineate. When I go to DI or to an e-tourism or to ESTA or whatever it is, it's sort of there's tracks of subjects, but it doesn't really differentiate like what level. Like I'd love to see us be a little more specific
Well,
about who is this for and who is this not. Like, because
but if you're saving your learning for these conferences, you've already lost, right?
but
Like a lot of that learning needs to happen
I
individually.
mean,
it should, right?
That's a fair point.
That is more than fair. But even if you do some of the certifications, which is the other way people get, believe that's how they're getting educated. There's a lot of stuff there that's very rudimentary. Like there's CDME, but then what's next? There's STS does their certifications, but then what's next? There's others.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to
Well,
figure out, is there a better way to educate us? Because I don't think it's realistic to say every individual is going to have the agency to go and self-train. Not everyone is a CA that's going to become a whiz
well, and
on AI. There's just
and there
not.
has to be some value to that. I mean, that is part of the value of being in person. I mean, I get tons of questions. If I do an in-person, and in October I'm going to Alaska and in Colorado and like a bunch of other places to do, like, I would swear, I guarantee you I will get 30 minutes worth of questions, right? If I do that in a webinar, I don't necessarily do that, right? Like I don't get those questions. People have questions about this. They want to be engaged in it. There's value in being in that room. But this is funny because I had this conversation with someone internally that was talking about a conference and like how they were doing a conference, and they were saying like we could have like a 101 and a 201 class. And I was like, the problem with that is that the wrong people are in both groups. Because if I ask you which group to be in, the people who really should be in the 101, right, Dunning-Kruger, like all these other sort of, like psychological things, that they don't know what they don't know. And so they're like, well, I don't want to be in that. I'm going to be in the class, the 201 class. And then the people who should be in the 201 class are like, man, there's so much I don't know about this. I should probably start in the 101 class. And so they end up being in the wrong group. And so I was saying like, okay, this is just spitballing stupid ideas. I was like, okay, what if in order to register for that breakout, you had to take a test?
Yeah.
Like, is there a scenario where we get, where you have to answer 5 questions, and if you don't answer those 5 questions the right way, then you get put in 101, and if you do
Mhm.
answer them, you get put in 201? Like, I don't know. Those are different ways of
Then you
trying to
look
deal
around,
with.
you're like, oh crap, I'm in this group.
So I mean but there is like, there's value that people need to get out of there. It's just a really hard thing to do. Here's a really core question. Okay. I was thinking about this the other day. The real question about AI that you have to ask yourself, or that you have to ask, like in an interview, if you're hiring someone, or you're just trying to figure out where they're at, is how is your use of AI different today than it was a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, right? Like, and if your answer is it's not, then that's really bad. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, I use it differently today than I did yesterday, and I suspect you guys do too. That's what has to happen, is you have to be pushing that envelope to understand what you can and can't get out of it. And if you've stagnated on one thing where you go like, yeah, I use it to, sometimes I use it to look up stuff. Well, man, in a lot of cases, that would have been better if you just use Google for that. Like, if you're just going to use
Mhm.
it like Google's actually way better at that than
Mhm.
ChatGPT is.
Right. Especially now with Gemini generative at the top of most results. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or AI mode. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think we're going to fix the education of the industry today, but I hope people listening have taken something from this conversation. I think we've tried to really look objectively at a subject. I mean, we came in with our biases for sure, but I think we've tried to be intellectually honest with each other. I think we challenged each other. I appreciate Adam playing devil's advocate there a little bit briefly as well, but hopefully we're doing what this show was intended to do, which is we're trying to make everyone a little bit better tomorrow than they were today. And I think we'd love to hear from you. If you have an opinion, you can always email us or hit us up on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love for you to leave a review as well, because that's how magically people find us and listen. Our listenership has been growing. We're getting emails and meeting people at conferences that we don't know that have listened to the show. So it's been really, really cool. So, CA, if they want to find you, what is the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is
LinkedIn,
the
just
best
CA
way. And
Clark on
I've been
LinkedIn.
I've been a lot more active recently, so I'm trying to put a lot of these kinds of things in there. I might actually do turn this into a blog post in a month or two,
Yeah,
and put
I'll
this in there
send you the
too.
transcript, and then you can use AI to write your blog post. How about
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
that?
And when you upload it to YouTube, the transcript's just there anyway, FYI.
Yeah,
That's true. Unless they can't understand the accent.
Yeah, I get that a lot with you, actually.
Uh-huh. Adam, if they want to find you, where can they do that?
So you can find me, Adam, at thebrandrevolt.com, LinkedIn, Adam Stoker, or on Tourism IQ.
Thank you, Adam. If you want to find me, it's Stuart.Butler at visitmyrtlebeach.com, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. Although I have not been that active recently. I need to get back into LinkedIn. So we'll see if we can correct that. But thank you for listening. Until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you both for having me.